All right, I think we're ready to get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marguerite Easterbrook. I'm the president of the West Village Chorale, and I'd like to welcome you to the fourth installment of our 49th annual Summer Sing series. The West Village Chorale is delighted to offer these weekly sings free of charge, though we are grateful for any donations you can give to help cover the costs. Now, as I've been mentioning over the past few weeks, we are continuing to make adjustments to the format as we receive feedback. So I have a few quick technical notes for this week. This week, the chat function will be disabled. However, if you have a specific question for tech or for our conductor, please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of the webinar screen. Additionally, this week, our conductor will scroll through the score on the screen, but we also recommend you open the PDF of the public domain score. The link for that is available on our website at westvillagechorale.org on our Summer Sings page. All right, now on to tonight's program. We are thrilled to have Dusty Francis leading us in the sing of the Mozart Requiem. Hi, Dusty, it's good to see you. Dusty Francis is the artistic director of the New York City Master Chorale. Thank you so much for being here today with us, Maestro. Please take it away.
Thank you, Marguerite. It's so nice to be here. Thank you to everybody out there for being wherever it is you are right now. It's wonderful. I can't see you, but I can see the names of all of the participants, and it's wonderful to see so many and to see so many familiar faces. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you, of course, to the West Village Chorale for inviting me to be back this year. I always look forward to these summer sings spent together. Obviously, this will be a little bit different than past years, but if the past few summer sings online are any indication, we should be able to have a lot of fun. I want to start by apologizing a little bit for my rather dramatic lighting and possibly sound. If it looks like I'm standing in an empty apartment, it's because I am. I'm currently in the process of moving and opted for the place with the better internet connection. So hopefully the sound won't be a problem. I'm using a fairly good microphone. Hopefully we won't get too much echo or boom, and hopefully visibility will be okay as well. As Marguerite said, my name is Dusty Francis. I'm the artistic director of the New York City Master Chorale. The mission of the New York City Master Chorale is to connect people through choral music by presenting high quality concerts inspired by the distinct energy, diversity, and talent of New York City. This upcoming season will, of course, look a little different than most of our past seasons. We're looking forward in the fall to meeting online for some Zoom hangs, both musical, social, and hopefully educational, and optimistically, hopefully realistically, hoping to be back in January for 2 spring concerts that we'll be happy to tell you more about in the next month or two. We are having auditions online via Zoom in the month of August, and we would welcome you to consider joining us for those. I'm going to put a link here in the chat and see if that will work in case you're interested for more information. I am seeing from some of our panelists that maybe the sound is a little difficult. Hopefully that will get better with time, and feel free to let us know, of course, if that's not the case. So tonight we're here to talk about and sing one of my very favorite pieces, the Mozart Requiem. It is something of a legendary piece at this point, and like so many legends, there are a mix of facts and myths that have come along with it. So hopefully tonight we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about both elements, both the fact and the myth. And if I am able to get permission for screen sharing, I'd love to just talk through a few points about the Requiem before we start. Hopefully, I imagine the Requiem is the sort of piece a lot of us have sung before, but I hope that there are still some points that will be new and worthy of your consideration tonight. Here we go. Looks like I'm able to share. Let's see. Hopefully now we're all looking at the same screen here with a picture of a young, handsome Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who lived from 1756 to December of 1791. And as I said, we'll talk a bit today about both the legends and the truth inherent in this Requiem. Just to give you a little rundown about what the plan is, we'll talk a little bit about Mozart, we'll do some warming up, we'll talk a little bit about the Requiem, and then we'll be singing nearly all of the choral movements. We'll leave the solo movements for another time when we can gather in person. So let's look at the man, Mozart. He was born in Salzburg in January of 1756. To put that timeline in a little bit of musical context, that would be about 5.5 years after the death of Bach, about 3 years before the death of Handel, almost 25 years after the birth of Haydn. And of course, we know that Haydn, very long lived, would outlive Mozart, despite his being born almost 25 years before him. And Mozart's birth almost 15 years before the birth of Beethoven. So we often lump in our heads Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven together, but we see actually there's quite a span in the course of their lives. Now, Mozart was born to a rather musical family. His parents were Leopold and Anna Maria Mozart. Leopold was himself a composer, a conductor, a music teacher, and a violinist. And of course, probably most famously, he was Mozart's first teacher. Mozart also had a very deep connection with Anna Maria, who was not the musician that Leopold was not the musical influence, but with whom Mozart, Wolfgang, I should say, had a very profound connection, and whose death had a deep effect on him, which possibly informed his take on the Requiem that he wrote many years later. Mozart also had 6 other children, but only one of whom survived beyond infancy. And that's Maria Anna, who was often called Marianne, and who history I think we largely know by her nickname, Nannerl. Both Mozart and his sister were virtuosic keyboardists, and from a very young age, Leopold decided to take advantage of that. The family toured with the children and with the whole family all over Europe for years at a time to show off the children at some of the highest courts, palaces, and private residences and concert halls across the continent. This was hard on the family. All of them took ill with serious illnesses at one point or another, and Wolfgang especially was often sickly. And it's posited that some of these early travels and these poor health conditions prompted by them early in his life contributed to the poor health and early death that he experienced later in life. As time passed, Salzburg began to feel small to Wolfgang. He quit an appointment there with the church and eventually, with much conversation, convinced his father to let him travel to Paris in search of a permanent position. This was a fruitful compositional time. He wrote some of his more famous works even later in his life, but he was not successful in finding a job. He had job offers. He was offered the position as organist at Versailles, but ultimately those were not the sort of positions he was looking for. Most tragically, it was in this time in Paris that his mother, who had come with him as chaperone, took ill, and she did die in Paris. Now, there are some really interesting letters between Wolfgang and his father, Leopold, from this time that if the libraries weren't closed, I was hoping that I could read you some excerpts from. But it was very clear that during this time, Wolfgang lied. We can't even say obfuscated. He lied to his father about his mother's health and about her death. He delayed notifying his father after she had already died. He told his father that she had taken ill. Eventually, he revealed the falsehood and let his father know, hopefully softening the blow by this deception, that she had died. He took it very difficult. It was very hard for him. It was a difficult loss. He stayed in Paris a while longer, but eventually, without work, he did have to return to Salzburg. Thankfully, when he returned, his father had set up a job that he was not especially fond of, but with the Archbishop Colloredo, that eventually took him to Vienna. Vienna is, if you've never been, a spectacular city. I've only been lucky enough to go once and for not even a whole day, but even so, it's a treasured memory. And Vienna was the place to be for Mozart. He arrived in the employ of Bishop Colloredo. However, they had a very tenuous and fraught relationship professionally, and eventually Mozart was allowed to leave his position. In fact, he tried to resign once previously and was denied the ability to do so. Eventually, they say with a kick on the behind, he was sent packing. Vienna is where Mozart spent the rest of his life. He worked there, he married, he had children, he made a lot of money. Unfortunately, he also spent even more than he made. Keep in mind that at this time, musicians worked under the patronage system. So musicians were employed by the people who had money and power. And in that day, it meant the aristocracy or royalty and the church. And Mozart's tenuous relationship with the church left him working for the aristocracy or the royalty, and he didn't really want that either. So as much as anyone at that time, Mozart was really trying to pioneer the freelance musician lifestyle, something that really hadn't been done before. The cults of personality that sprang up later over Beethoven and Liszt, for example, that didn't really exist yet. So Mozart was really paving a new path here by working this way. Even so, even with the difficulty of the career path that he set for himself, even with his wavering maturity and discipline, Mozart was prolific. He composed in every genre of the age. And frankly, he did it better than almost anybody else, whether it was symphonic, operatic, choral, solo, piano, you name it, and he did it. So I've been talking for a little while now. We're going to talk about the Requiem, but I think we're 10 minutes in. Let's go ahead and take advantage of the opportunity now to do a little bit of warming up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And everybody warms up differently. We're going to do a few things that I would normally do in the start of a choral rehearsal if we were all together. First things first, I'm standing partially from my lack of furniture, but also because it feels a little better to after sitting and staring at a screen all day. I welcome you. I encourage you to stand as well. Please do not feel obligated. I can't see you. No one else can either. If you decided to instead go get a coffee right now, no one would be any the wiser. But I'm going to stand and do just a little bit of stretching. So just reaching up and leaning to the right, feeling a stretch possibly on each side, possibly in the back, and then bringing the arms down with the shoulders back, which ideally opens the rib cage to allow full expansion of the lungs. And with that idea in mind, we'll just roll our shoulders back about 3 times and forward about 3 times. Anything that we can do to relieve muscular tension in any of these strap muscles that place the larynx in its place in our throat will give us pay dividends in the end. Let's also just do a couple deep breaths, a few vocalizes, and then we'll get into the Requiem. So with those shoulders down and back, with our rib cage fully expanded, take 1 deep breath in and exhale on a hiss. Take another deep breath in. Exhale. And 1 more, breathe in. And a nice yawn sigh on ah. Ah. I'm sure you sound beautiful. All right, let's do a little bit of vocalizing. Now, again, I am in an empty apartment, so without piano, but I do have a handy pitch pipe app. We'll warm up a cappella tonight. That's a B flat, and we'll just start with ooh-wee, all together. Ooh-wee, up a half. Ooh-wee, up a half. Ooh-wee, again. Ooh-wee, and ooh-wee, and ooh-wee, and ooh-wee, and ooh-wee, and ooh-wee. 3 more. Ooh-wee, and ooh-wee. 1 more. Ooh-wee. All right, let's just do 1 more to stretch a little bit of both sides of that range. It'll be a 9-note scale, so we'll start on tonic, moving in 16th or 8th notes, depending on how you're thinking. We'll go up to 1 above tonic and back down, and we'll do all of that on an E vowel, initiated with a V, sibilant V, vibrating V. Let's start in A major. So our first pitch will be an A. The top pitch of this 9-note scale will be a B natural. And it should sound like this. V, 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 V. We'll try that together. 3 and V. V, 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 up a half. V, 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 up a half. V, 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 up a half. V, 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 again. V, 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 again. V, 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 3 more. V, 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 last 2. V, 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 1 more. V, 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 V. And hopefully that's enough to get us where we need to go. If not, the first movement of the Requiem is pretty friendly and can act as a continued warm-up. So all right, before we get into our singing, we're just going to talk for about 5 more minutes about the Requiem itself, and then we'll get down to work, doing some singing together. So again, I'm going to share my screen here. We'll have just a moment of Richard Simmons, which is probably enough as we think about the Requiem itself. So first things first, we take for granted, I think, often in the choral world that people understand what a requiem is, but I don't know that that's always the case. So the Requiem Mass is a Catholic rite for the dead. It serves a couple functions, both textually and theologically, and it's interesting if you ever have time to really dig into a good translation of the text, because there is a lot there that's curious and clearly hails from a very different time and is influenced by many different traditions. I would say the first and most commonly and widely known purpose of the Requiem Mass is as an intercession or a prayer on behalf of the dead who are about to face judgment. And by proxy, on behalf of all of us who will one day find ourselves in that place, facing this awe-inspiring and quite fearful process of judgment. The second purpose of the Requiem is found inherent in the text, which is that this is fulfillment of a sort of covenant with God. In other words, that by enacting these prescribed rites for the dead, God will do God's part and let us into heaven. So we're keeping up our end of the bargain in hopes that God will keep up. Oh, seeing blank screen. Sorry, folks. Thanks for letting me know. Let's see if we can figure that out. Let's see, I wonder if that did any difference. If someone could maybe put in the chat or the Q&A whether we're now seeing a slideshow. I see it. Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll get more info soon. Don't say slideshow. Okay, thank you all so much. Very helpful. I appreciate your understanding and as we all figure out this new way of living. So again, fulfillment of sort of a covenant with God, that we're doing our part, expecting that God will do God's. The last one is one that we will not see tonight in Mozart because it's not inherent in the original text, and it's really a later development, which is the idea of a requiem as comfort for the living, comfort for the people who are left behind. We see this much more commonly in the 19th century and much even more commonly in the 20th and 21st century. We see it in Fauré, we see it in Duruflé, we see it in Brahms, this idea that the requiem can also serve to comfort the bereaved who are left behind after the passing of a loved one. Mozart does not give us that. And again, it's not inherent in the text. If you read the whole text of the Requiem, I think what you're forced to conclude is that in the minds of the authors of this text, of the faithful of the Middle Ages from which most of this text comes, death is a very scary thing. It is something to be faced with fear and trepidation and bowing and scraping. And Mozart's music reflects this idea about death. Whether that is a reflection of Mozart's own personal views of death is hard to say. We don't have a lot of original sources on Mozart's feeling at this time. But it's clear that he's certainly interpreting the text to read that way. So this leads to another question, which is, why did Mozart write this Requiem in the first place? Mozart was born and raised Catholic. He wrote many works for the church, some of them sincere expressions of his own devotion, but we can declare pretty decisively that that was not the case for this. By this point in his life, he was not a devout or a faithful Catholic. He was very active in the stonemasons, actually. And this Requiem was written on commission from a count in Vienna. Now, part of the legend of the Requiem is that it was an anonymous commission and nobody knew who had commissioned this. Well, in reality, it may have been an anonymous commission, but everybody knew what the deal was. This was Count Franz von Walsegg, who was also a Freemason in Vienna, actually. He wanted to commemorate the death of his wife. And also we know from historical records that this particular count had a funny habit of giving performances in private of unknown or unpublished works by other composers and passing it off as his own. So the idea of this anonymous commission is likely tied in with this idea that the Count very may have been planning to give a private performance in memoriam for his deceased wife and then pass this off as his own work instead of Mozart's. And we don't have to wonder very far about why Mozart would have accepted the commission. He was a freelancer, he was in debt, he was lousy with money, and he needed the money from this commission. So what happened? He died. The cause of Mozart's death is not definitively known, but we have absolutely no reason to believe there was any foul play involved. So for those of you who still look askance anytime someone mentions Salieri, you can forget that. I promise Salieri did not poison Mozart. They were not really rivals, though it makes for a much more interesting movie than the real story. There's a wonderful letter I mentioned before that I had been trying to get my hands on some of Mozart's letter. There's a wonderful letter that was written a few years after Mozart's death, I believe by his niece, but I may be mistaken on that, who was in the room, reported being in the room when he was on his deathbed as he was passing. And she describes in sort of haunting detail, watching him on his deathbed as he dictated the timpani part of the Requiem to his assistant. And of course, passing before he was able to complete it. Very sad. We also know, of course, that Mozart the circumstances of his burial have become rather legendary as well. The idea has circulated in popular culture that he died not only with the Requiem unfinished, but with so many debts unpaid that he was buried anonymously in a mass grave. There's this really clear picture, I think, in a lot of our minds of this casket that can be opened at the bottom and the next body's put in. And that's what Mozart had, and how disgraceful for this genius and wonderful, brilliant man. Well, like so many things, there is a kernel of truth in this, but that's about it. That hinged bottom reusable coffin was a real thing in practice at the time, but it was not practiced in Vienna, where Mozart lived, died, and was buried. The citizens of Vienna strongly objected to these limitations and restrictions on burial, and so that was not the case. We have records not of Wolfgang Mozart's, but of Constanza's, his wife, her records that show that she paid for the cost of a burial, including a coffin, and burial not in a mass unmarked grave, but in German it's allgemeines Grab, so just sort of the usual common grave. So there is a kernel of truth in that really fantastic story, but maybe for the best that it's not entirely true. Mozart got sort of a normal standard burial. So Mozart died before the piece could be finished. How far did he get? It's actually a little bit of a harder question to answer than you might think. We know for sure from manuscripts and autographs, from music written in his hand, that he got through the first 8 bars into the Lacrimosa, fully vocastrated, all the voice parts written out, fully orchestrated. But beyond that, it's a little harder to say. We know that there were sketches of later movements that were not fully fleshed out. We suspect that there might have been other sketches that we don't know about that are lost to history, but that may have been extant at the time when the Requiem was finished. So if the piece was left unfinished, we have to ask ourselves, so what is it that we're singing? Because we don't stop 8 bars after the Lacrimosa. Again, Mozart did leave debts behind that needed to be paid. He left a family behind that needed money to live on. So his wife, Constanza, asked one of his students, Franz Süssmayr, to quietly finish the work so she could collect the commission payment from the Count that we had mentioned before. She needed the Count to believe that this was Mozart's work to collect the full payment. Similarly, she promoted the work in concerts and public performances to raise money. funny. So her secretiveness around the origin of the work in real time as it was happening almost certainly contributed to a lot of these myths that have sprung up over the course of history. I think it's fair to ask, how did Süssmayr do? He did his best, I think we can say, but it's very clear he was no Mozart. There are voice leading errors, there are some truly lousy themes, poor orchestration choices, numerous breaks with tradition of what we might expect of Mozart to have written at that time, most likely to avoid advertising Süssmayr's own shortcomings. For instance, in a few places where you might really expect a big, bold, impressive fugue, Süssmayr just goes 5-1, Amen, and the movement ends. It's a telling sign when we have Süssmayr's work. In fact, another really telling sign is the last movement of the piece. Süssmayr probably made a wise decision. Instead of trying to write a grand finale worthy of Mozart's work, Süssmayr copied and pasted the entire first movement's worth of music and just sort of fit the text to it as best he could, so that at the very end, at least, our ear and our voices and our hearts tell us that Mozart is with us again. Given that the Süssmayr work is not pristine and excellent, it's fair to ask, why sing his? Didn't anyone else have a go at this? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Others have completed the Requiem. In fact, quite a few others have completed the Requiem. And some of them are extremely compelling. And people took a wide variety of philosophies in doing this. Some, like Franz Bayer, basically stay very close to Süssmayr's work, but fix things that are obvious errors, not places where Süssmayr took artistic license or made choices, but where he really just made mistakes, and Bayer cleans it up. I think this is a great solution. I think a lot of choirs do perform this version, and I think it's a great option. Others, however, two of the most famous are by Maunder and Levin, have completely recomposed whole swaths of the work. There are whole movements, whole sections that they threw out the Süssmayr work and wrote brand new music. And I have to tell you that some of them sound excellent. They sound like Mozart. They sound believable. I'll also tell you that in singing them, I often find that something feels not quite right. But to the ear, scholarly, to analysis, it really looks like it could be Mozart. However, I have to believe that the farther in history we get away from Mozart, the farther away we're probably getting away from his true intent. Süssmayr was a pupil of Mozart. He had his sketches in hand. He wasn't studying from facsimiles. He was steeped in the sounds of Viennese 1791. It's possible he had resources we no longer have. And I think it's a valid and great option to continue performing Süssmayr for all of his flaws, even though we have some alternatives available to us. I also think it's great to explore these new alternatives. But for tonight, we're going to stick closest to the time period and probably closest to the version we all know best, which is the Süssmayr completion. And I think that that's probably quite enough talking for a while. So we are going to get right to the singing. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to pull up the score. If not, we will have a chance to scroll the score, as Marguerite said, on the screen. We're going to be following along with a performance by the English Baroque soloist and the Monteverdi Choir, as conducted by John Elliott Gardner. Some of his tempi tend to be a little bit fast, but no one can hear you if you make a mistake. Do your best, and we're all going to be fine. I see that we've put the score link in the chat again. Thank you so much if you would like to pull that up. Now, we're not going to do every single movement of the piece. Like I said, we're going to omit the soloist movements. Also, for time, we're going to omit one or two of Süssmayr's biggest sins. And I hope you'll forgive me for delivering a little bit of an incomplete requiem here. So I'm going to go ahead now and pull up our video. Let's see. Right, there we go. Optimize that. Hopefully we are now all looking at a YouTube video, but for some reason I am not. Give me 1 second here, folks. There, now hopefully we're all looking at a YouTube screen. All right, and I think without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start singing. Everyone is on mute. Unfortunately, you won't be able to hear each other. You probably have realized by now. However, we should ideally be able to sing along well with the fabulous English Baroque soloists and the Monteverdi Choir. And without further ado, let's get started. Anybody can feel free to sing our soprano solo upcoming. Bass. Thank you so, so much. Oh, it's so exciting to be listening to this music, singing along, conducting along to this music. I'm just going to stop us for a moment because we are, as I said, going to skip around just a moment. So you'll see your screen go away from full screen. We're going to jump ahead to the Rex Tremende. So if you're following along in a score, you may need to move ahead. I'm going to move us ahead here in our video performance. I'm just going to take 1 second if I can find it to check the Q&A, make sure that we're not having any trouble. We have one black screen. If we have any tech help handy, maybe we can help with that. Sorry about that problem. Okay, so it looks like we're good to go. We're going to continue with the Rex Tremende. As I always tell every choir I've ever conducted on this piece, there's no such thing as too much rolled R at the top of this piece. Have fun with it. You cannot do too much, and that's doubly true when you're the only one in the room singing it. So let's begin. Rex Tremende. Oh, so much drama. So beautiful. So we're going to skip ahead again. Again, we're going to skip these solo movements when we can. So we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to the Confutatis Maledictis. If you're following along in the score, that's movement 6. If you're looking at the screen, it's already up. I wanted to take an opportunity while we were scrolling or flipping between pages, as the case may be, to just give you a little bit of a sense of the text for Confutatis Maledictis, because it is an excellent example of the fear and trembling that death incited in the writers of this text. Confutactis maledictis flammis acribus addictis, voca me cum benedictis. When the accused are confounded and doomed to flames of woe, call me above the blessed. Not a lot of sympathy for those other people. Oro suplex et acclinis, cor contritum quasi cinis, gere cura mei finis. I kneel with submissive heart. My contrition is like ashes. Help me in my final condition. So we're going to go ahead and sing next the Confutatis, followed by the Lacrimosa, and then we'll take another just pause long enough to skip ahead beyond the next solo movements. One more thing to highlight before we start singing. Confutatis maledictis flammis acribus addictis voca mecum benedictis. It's pretty obvious that not only were these people very afraid of death, they were also very handy at writing Latin poetry. This is in a meter called trochaic tetrameter, meaning it's strong weak, strong weak, strong weak, strong weak, and 4 of those trochees or strong weak feet. Very interesting if you are into Latin poetry, which there must be some people out there, right? All right, let's look at Confutatis. Hopefully we're all there now in our score and ready to go. Basses, you're in after only one beat. That is a tall order when we're singing along to a recording. I'll do my best to cue you at the right time. If I fail, well, sorry. Let's give it a try. And now the prayer. my. So in that movement, we left the pen of Mozart into Süssmayer's work. And one of the indicators is that final Amen. That's one of the places where music historians cite that Mozart would have done more with that Amen. There would have been a fugue, it would have been triumphant, it would have been long. And instead, we know that Süssmayer did a nice plagal, a nice Amen cadence and said, Amen, let's get out of here while we can. All right, we are skipping ahead once more to movement 9, which is the Ostias, followed by the Sanctus movement 10. So whether you're scrolling, flipping, or just waiting for me to hit the right button, we're now looking at the, what did I just say? Ostias. Where are you, Ostias? Lacrimosa, Ostias, here we are. So we'll give you about one more second there to find your page or the right place on the PDF. We'll make our video full screen. Now that I've drawn your attention to it, start noticing, are there things here that seem not quite worthy of Mozart? Some themes, some harmonies, some voice leading. I think once you're attuned to it, they start sticking out a little more obviously. All right, let's try our Hostias all together, please.
Oh
And where we just stopped, that Osana fugue is one of the other notorious places, particularly the ending, where rather than finishing gracefully playing out the fugue as Mozart would have done, Süssmayr has no choice but by the limitations of his own art of cutting it short and saying, that's all I got for you. I hope that you enjoyed it while it lasted. So we're going to scroll ahead to the very end now. We're going to be looking at the Agnus Dei, which goes into the Lux Aeterna, and the Cum Sanctis Tuis. So while I pull that up and while you pull that up, we'll talk just a little bit comparing those two fugues we just sang. Quam olim abrahe, quite sophisticated, versus the Osana fugue. Clear evidence that we have manuscripts, sketches from Mozart for the Quam olim abrae that were not fully fleshed out, admittedly. Süssmayr did have work to do there to complete it, most of which he did admirably. Again, there are some orchestral and voice leading errors in the full texture, but basically that fugue works. It feels like Mozart. It feels really well paired to the text as opposed to the Osana fugue, which starts almost feeling like it could be something and then just really, unfortunately, dries up on the vine. So hopefully I've given you enough time to find that Agnus Dei. It's movement 12 in the score that we shared. It's also up on your screen now if you're singing from the score on the YouTube video. From here to the end, we're going to go without a stop, just as the music does. Feel free, as we did before, to sing along with any solo passages that look juicy and to your liking. I would recommend, if you haven't been already, when we get to that final fugue, the Cum Sancti Spiritu, you'll know it when we get there. Go ahead and stand up. I think that it'll feel better to end that way. In a standing position than in a seated one. But you do you. Again, your camera's off. We won't know the difference whether you're sitting, standing, or lying down. All right, Agnus Dei all the way through the end. Here we go. Enjoy those fabulous dynamics from our Monteverdi choir. See if you can emulate them as well. bass. All right, congratulations, everybody. We did it. We made it to the end. And we even did it on time. It's 8:37. I think we were shooting for between an hour and a half. So that leaves us just a few minutes for announcements and thank yous. So I want to again thank all of you so much for being here, being wherever you were, and for joining us this evening. It's so lovely to, even if we can't physically be together the way we would like, to share an evening together, making music, talking about music, and being in community. Thank you as always to the West Village Chorale for organizing these events, for inviting me to be a part of them, and for filling that gap during the summer when many of us lose that opportunity to sing. Before we go tonight, I just want to remind you one more time that Master Chorale will be functioning this fall. We'll be doing it remotely, hopefully to be back in the spring in person. If you're interested, we are always open to new members. We're a wonderful community of singers of many levels, and we would love for you to join us. I'll put that audition link back in the chat in case you would like it. And I think at this point, it is my turn to turn things over, I think back to Marguerite, who has a few closing things to say.
All right. Well, Dusty, thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you for leading us in a beautiful evening of Mozart. Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the evening. As we've been saying, this is an evolving format and we still want to hear your feedback. So we invite you to complete the survey that pops up once the webinar ends. Before we go, I'd like to tell you about our upcoming Sing. Next Monday, August 3rd, we will have Tien Hui Eng, the music director of Pioneer Valley Symphony, leading us in a summer Sing premiere. We will be singing selections from living composer Mary D. Watkins' piece Dark River. It's a new opera oratorio based on the life of the civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer. The Sing will feature a live soprano soloist, multimedia presentation, including a synced score and short talks by the composer and also historian Janice Hamlet. We believe this work could not be more important, especially given our current moment in history, and we look forward to sharing it with you. Since we will be singing the work of a living composer, we have portions of the score available for purchase in advance at a modest cost. We have linked the site where you can purchase the score on our website, and we will include those links in the email blasts that we send out this week as well. Additionally, the West Village Chorale will be donating a portion of the evening's donations to Women Arts, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing the visibility of women artists in all art forms. It's going to be a really special and relevant Sing, so we hope that you'll be able to join us. All right, so that's it for me. We hope you enjoyed your evening and consider making a donation to the West Village Chorale. Dusty, thank you so much again for being here tonight. This was such a treat. And thank you all for joining. Have a good evening. Bye, everyone. Good night.